Okay, so here with Sister Tia Scott, we're going to have a critical conversation. Um, the subject I want to talk about today is child discipline,
Okay.
and get your thoughts. You have two kids, two boys, two young boys. So I want to talk to you about just what's your thoughts on just child discipline? Like how do you approach, child discipline?
It's a very good question. I think when you're a first parent to a child, you're kind of just trying to figure it out, what works best for you, the personality of your child, is it effective, and things like that. So I think with my oldest, Julian, he's 9, tried a couple of things, just reflecting on my childhood and being a product of being spanked or being disciplined in a, I wouldn't say aggressive, but very directional and very clear kind of way. I thought some of my history was effective, others was not. So I was kind of keeping that in perspective when I was addressing my son. So I feel, it's a trial and error kind of thing. I think now that I think about it, probably the first kind of discipline or behavioral issues or problems was the hitting. And I do remember spanking my son, and it was actually very effective. He's a very sensitive kind of personality. I felt eventually he understood this is unacceptable. We don't do this. We try to couple that with the verbal explanation as to what the consequences are as you get older. You may be going to jail if someone pursues assault charges against you. So just trying to couple the discipline with the education. So I feel like eventually that worked for him. We would kind of slap him on his hand or slap him on his leg, which was totally different than my upbringing, but I felt it snapped him back in it got his attention, it got him focused on what I'm trying to say. It had a very sense of urgency that I really thought was effective. I didn't feel good about it personally, but I was happy with the results. And I was happy to discontinue when I felt it wasn't necessary. I think other things I wasn't quick to discipline him on. I feel like the physical hitting and all that stuff was something that I felt was of an urgent matter. Anything else, I would kind of have other consequences, that taking away privileges, just based off of the situation, kind of addressing the concern that I had. Now with the little one, totally different personality, totally different person. Very much not sensitive. He would hit, he would slap, even to this day he does it. And I would literally spank him and he would just ask for more. So it was one of those things where you struggle to say, is this really effective? I'm telling him not to hit, and then here I am hitting, and then we're both kind of in a not effective, efficient position that I don't feel good about and that he doesn't feel good about. So with him, I didn't feel the spanking was effective. Now maybe some people feel like, oh, you need to hit harder, you need to do this, you need to do that, and I can understand that. But for me personally, I say, this is a trial and error process. Here's somebody who really don't care at the end of the day. So for him, his consequences look a bit different. He doesn't want to disappoint. So if I come across this is a disappointment, let's make a list of all the things you enjoy and look forward to in your life, and let's go ahead and remove all of those, and here's your consequences, and let me see you do it again. We just add on. So I'm not going to say that that's effective, but I think it works better for him versus how I reacted to the other ones. So I do feel, based off of my history and my upbringing, that I have adopted some elements of my history, but I've also kind of made my discipline positions unique to myself, coupled with each child and their personalities.
Right. Certainly is trial and error. It's really no set answer for the way to do things, and you know, every kid is different. Let's explain a little bit about, you know, it sounds like to me that you've based a lot of what you're doing discipline on how you were disciplined growing up. You mentioned some of it you liked, some of it you didn't. What parts of it do you think was effective, and then what parts do you think wasn't effective?
I think when I was younger and say I did something wrong and got spanked or disciplined in that way, I kind of preferred that way because I felt like it was something that would be quickly addressed, and then I could just continue being me and doing what I need to do later on in the day. So as a child, I could see how that could be a manipulation to just, okay, well, if this is all I have to endure to continue to do what I'm going to do, I would choose that route. Mm-hmm. So as I reflect on my upbringing, I felt that probably was not effective from a parental standpoint, but it was effective from the child standpoint. However, when I got older, and again, the list of things you enjoy, the things you want to do, when those all get removed, I think that for me is more effective, especially when you start understanding your level of responsibility when you're living in your parents' home and the things, their rules and what they want. You kind of have to grow up and respect that, because you're part of a family, and here's the rules, and this is what you have to do to be a part of the whole thing. So I think that was very effective. So, you know, I think in a way I'm kind of adopting that as the parent in my household, hoping that my children will also maybe provide me feedback older, just to kind of, you know, because again, every parent is imperfect. And for me, I constantly tell my kids that, you know, mommy doesn't have all the answers and mommy is imperfect. But at the end of the day, it's important for everybody to know what the ultimate goal is, and for you to be respectful, to be responsible, to respect your parents, and to respect everybody, actually. So, you know, you want them to have the foundation, and how much effort or however creativity you need to instill that, I feel like as a parent, it's kind of like a default that that's what we're trying to do. It's the ultimate same goal, but so many different ways in order to achieve that goal.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, how do you think, I mean, you touched on it a little bit in terms of, you know, we talked about kind of how you were brought up and some of the things you liked and didn't like. Do you think, I mean, how do you think that's kind of molded your belief system? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. How do you think that's molded, you know, how you discipline your kids? I mean, I guess, you know, in hearing you, it sounds like, you know, possibly some of the things you didn't like, you know, not necessarily feel as comfortable doing with your kids now. I mean, talk about how you think that kind of molded the way you do things.
I mean, I think it's the foundation. I think it's holistically who I am. Like I said, right, wrong, indifferent is who I am. Yeah. I try to communicate with my children that everybody is different. So, you know, you may have a different opinion, you may have a different like. And so to be able to accept everybody for their differences and have a perspective to look at it as something to celebrate instead of something to divide. I feel like once I got to that level, I could truly appreciate even my parents and the indifferences that we had, coupled with what I felt worked, really allowed me from a child up to an adult to establish the type of interpersonal relationship that I want to have, not only with my friends and coworkers and everything else, but I actually have it with my parents. So I think if I could somewhat focus on my kids to learn that and accept everybody and their differences, and you may not understand, and it may not even be your place, and it's not all about you, it could be about somebody else. These are kind of the things that I feel are my foundation that I came from, that regardless of if it's identical to me growing up or different, it's going to be the foundation to what influence I want for my kids.
Right. And it's a good thing to absolutely have a foundation in what you want to, you know, make sure that's important to you as you move forward. I guess really the last question I want to ask you is, as you go through this, journey. It's not easy. I mean, again, you got two boys. They're both different. As you said before, one responds a different way than the other one. How do you think, obviously we're always striving to be better, but how effective do you think your approach has been so far?
I mean, I'm definitely not in a position to toot my horn, but I do feel that, I'm constantly making reference and making comments when there is a discord in certain conversations, or if there's conflict in certain areas. I'm reminding them, you don't tell him how to feel. Hey, that's different from what you like, but guess what? This is what he likes. So what can we do to support him? Hey, that was clearly unacceptable and wrong, and so we're not going to accept that. So let's talk about how that's going to look different next time, and let's make it clear what the consequences are as a result for that. Because they're very competitive. Whatever you say to one, oh, well, I want to do this too. And, you say something, you reward something, oh, well, I did that too. So at this age, I feel like they're all about themselves. And I'm just hoping to be consistent and hoping to, one day sit back and say, you know what, even though I may not have seen in certain situations that I was effective, that once they get older and once, I do the best I can, and at that point, let God take care of the rest. I just sit back and say, you know what, all we can do is the best we can do, and I did the best that I can do, and as a result, I can't be kind of too focused on it. So I'm trying to just be light about it, laugh whenever possible, and be able to say, you know what, these are the memories that once they grow up and go old, like, I'm going to be like treasuring and cherishing, even though it's so dark or hard in those moments. I'm like, wow, you remember this happened or that happened, and just look forward to the time that you can sit back based off of all the conflict and just laugh and just have a good time. So I'm just kind of looking forward to that.
Well, and before, I know I said that was the last question, but you sparked something I want to talk about one last time before we go, because you talk a lot about trying to empower your kids with talking and personal relationships. Obviously it was in the same household as yours, and it's kind of an old school way of doing it, right? It's this is what you do it, and there you go. Just talk a little bit more about how you try to, how do you empower those? It seems like that's a very important piece for you, is trying to empower your kids into expressing themselves a little bit more. Talk a little bit about that before we go.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would probably mention is I kind of feel like growing up, really wasn't encouraged to really communicate as much. Wasn't really encouraged to ask a whole lot of questions and things like that. We were raised under the motto, a child is, seen, not heard, or I forget what the actual comment is, but you just kind of limit your interactions with kids. And so for me, it really didn't work for me. So I'm really big in communication and just trying to express myself somehow, or to share how I feel. And I also have a desire to seek how others feel and what I can do for them. And I think for me, that's when I realized that I might do well being a counselor, because I just like to not place judgment. I just want to, allow people to be who they are without any judgment and things like that. So, I mean, as far as the communication is, I think it's just a part of my personality. Yeah. I'm okay with it. Sometimes some people may feel a little bit uncomfortable with it. I think it can be problematic at times, and so I think it's important for me to be able to look in the mirror and recognize those moments of problems, and constantly work on myself and reflect in those moments. And it's worked for me, and I feel like I've gotten the results. I've been able to address things and try to let it go. So whatever recipe I found for myself is kind of working. And I think everybody, including my kids, should find the recipe that's best for them, and start by loving themselves and accepting themselves, but then also, just doing the best that they can to be genuine, and whatever that is. So I mean, I hope that answered the question.
No, it did. And you did an unbelievable job. You are doing a great job with with the kids, and
Thank you.
I think the biggest part, you know, is doing what you feel is better and best, and just keep doing what you're doing.
Well,
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
your time.
And thank you so much.